Hello and welcome to the first episode of Raising the Barr, the go-to podcast for business owners and marketing enthusiasts looking to improve their digital marketing game. Today, we're joined by a very special guest. He's a businessman, he's an entrepreneur, he's a philanthropist, he's a business mentor, he's a public speaker, and I can safely say he is the absolute king of networking and a master when it comes to building a personal brand online. Ladies and gentlemen, my good friend, Mr. Matt Haycox.
Thanks for making me number one.
Well, I've been talking about doing this podcast for quite a while now, and I've always said I wanted you to be the first guest on Raising the Barr. And there's really two reasons for that. Firstly, you've got this incredible story to tell, this idea of making it all, losing it all, and then making it back again tenfold. But secondly, I think if we look at the 5 or 6 years we've known each other now, seen your personal brand develop, evolve, and even sometimes I'd say pivot into the massive online success it is now. But I think before we start to unpack the secrets of how you achieve that, let's start by finding out who Matt Haycox is. Fill us in on the journey so far.
Long story short, I'm a career entrepreneur. And in the late 80s, early 90s, I just knew I wanted to be rich. And the only way people thought of to be rich back then was to own your own business. So I decided I was going to go and own my own business. From 10, 11 years old, kind of got my hands on every get-rich-quick scheme I could. I used to try and find a product that was going to be the next big thing. I mean, I remember a couple of my flying lines with Tamagotchi pets and inflatable chairs with them matching inflatable cushions. But unfortunately, I couldn't sell anything at enough scale to be able to retire at 16. So I left school at 18. Done my A-levels. I didn't want to go to uni. I had my parents very much strong-arming me into it. For me, it was just going to be a waste of 3 or 4 years. So we kind of compromised, and I took a gap year, and I went off to work during this gap year. And the deal was, if I could make my millions during the gap year, then I wouldn't have to go back to uni. The first job for me was working in a family business. It was a corporate clothing company that my dad had just invested in. It was one that had been through administration. It was supposed to have come out the other side and just needed a little bit of capital and a guiding hand. It needed a lot more than that. I mean, it was run by a generational family who were incompetent, verging on fraudulent. I mean, there was no customer base, or the customer base was desperately trying to leave. The suppliers wouldn't supply. The staff didn't know what they were doing. And I worked in there for probably 2 or 3 months, coming home every night, banging on the kitchen table, saying, "Dad, they're completely screwing you." And one night I said, "You've got to let me do something." He says, "You know what? You go and do what you want with this. Can't fuck it up any more than they have done. So do your worst." And I went in the next day, fired everybody apart from this little old man called Bob, who worked in the warehouse, and we started the business from scratch. And I didn't know what I was doing. I guess I just knew what other people shouldn't be doing, and that coupled with 10 years of reading books and a desire to, or rather a humility probably, to ask questions of anybody who I knew more than me, which realistically was probably everybody back then. I started working this business, finding a new product base, finding a new customer base, and building it up from scratch. And over the 3 years of me running it, we went from a £300,000 a year loss to a £30,000 profit. I knew running a corporate clothing business wasn't really my future, so went off to go and work in leisure. I didn't know anything about leisure, but I felt that as a now successful 21-year-old, it was time for me to make my mark on leisure. And every 21-year-old guy wants to own a bar because you think you're going to get paid for drinking beer, shagging girls, and having fun. And it didn't quite work out like that. I had a couple of years of running some crappy little pubs. I moved on from that to open a strip club called Wildcats in Wakefield. I knew the industry. I knew what I thought were the kind of principles of business which weren't being applied to other strip clubs, because typically they're either run by the mafia or a local rich guy's plaything or whatever it may be. And I wanted to bring and create a brand to it. That first club, it hit the ground running. It found a model that worked, and I wanted to replicate it. I didn't have any money to grow after that first club. I got introduced to small ticket lenders, guys who could lend me 30 grand, lend me 50 grand, and started to borrow money, refinance the club that I'd already built. I used that to then go and buy a second club. And he spent the next 5 or 6 years learning how to borrowing money and using it to grow both a strip club empire effectively and multiple other businesses. And by 2008, I was the biggest strip club operator in the UK with 11 trading venues from Blackpool down to Bristol and everywhere in between. I had normal bars and clubs. I had a property portfolio. I had juice bars. I had a lending business because by then I'd learned how to lend because I'd spent so much time borrowing and riding high. June 2008, started the credit crunch. The rugs pulled from me pretty much overnight. I found out very quickly that we were undercapitalised and over-leveraged, and in the space of about 6 or 8 weeks, went from being a 27-year-old running multiple 8-figure businesses back then to losing the lot overnight and waking up with a mortgage that I couldn't pay, a 1-year-old daughter and a missus that wasn't over the moon, and thought, shit, we've got a problem. And I rebuilt from zero back then. And then for the next 15 years, moved from the other side of the table, really, and went from being a borrower to a lender, from being a business operator to a business investor, and really like you say, a consultant, a mentor. Over the last 15 years, I've grown a lending business that's really based around the fact that whatever problems my customers have got, I've had more than them. I've come out the other side, and we've grown a pretty successful business out of it, and I can't make that story any shorter.
Well, I warned everyone it was a good story. Like you said, you've got a young daughter, you've got a missus that's not happy. I'm guessing you had lenders that weren't happy. The press around you wasn't particularly flattering at the time. So you've sat there at rock bottom and began this sort of road to redemption, which has obviously over time been fantastically successful for you. In that period of time, did you actively start developing a personal brand, or was it something that happened quite organically?
My rebuilding and road to redemption, if you like, started the day after I went bankrupt. Because I always say I don't really have an exciting story to tell about, that I've been at the bottom of the bottle and, smoking the crack pipe for months, thinking where did it all go wrong? The day after I went bankrupt, I realised I had bills to pay. And I always say I got a 1-year-old daughter who needed feeding, a missus who needed the mortgage covering, and I was never born to be poor. So I wasn't going to get paid watching Jeremy Kyle. I knew that at 27 years old, despite the fact that everybody around me was telling me I was finished, I just couldn't allow myself to be finished. And I think it's one of those situations where I think what the expression is, if you say you can or you say you can't, you're right either way. When did I start to really concentrate on the personal branding? That actually wasn't until about 2016, if you like, because for the first few years of being out of the bankruptcy and getting back on with work, I guess I just kind of went with each day. And also, I guess, obviously Google was around and the press were around, but things were still a lot more offline than online back in those days. And it takes, I guess it takes more time for offline stuff to populate, be it positive or negative. And there was never really seeing much issue. And also I was still probably working in quite a localized area. But when I started to go more further afield, when I started to try and, raise money from bigger institutions, etc., as soon as they Googled me, they'd see Matt Haycox bankrupt, Matt Haycox disqualified director, and it was kiboshing the deals. This story is 7 years old, but it's not that. So it's not that these Google articles are from yesterday; they're from 7 years ago. But what I learned quickly was that there was nothing new in the last 7 years that had been online, and therefore the only thing they could see was these. So I used to work, occasionally with PR guys, and effectively the personal branding then span out from there, because what we started to do was to create content to put online, to push down the old Google, because effectively you can't really remove the old Google. You've just got to bury it as deep as you can. So we started to create content. We started to get press placements, or do whatever we could to populate those first few pages of Google with new stuff and with good stuff, and effectively tell the story in a way that we wanted it to be told. I then started to realise that this wasn't going to benefit me just by burying the old stuff. This was going to help generate leads. This was going to help enhance credibility, etc. And then I guess since then, I'm a branding addict.
You're definitely a branding addict. One of the things that's so fantastic about your content now is we look at business influencers, lifestyle influencers, personal brands, and I just question the authenticity of a lot of them. If I see one more guy telling me to go to the gym at 5 a.m., only eat this, only do that. And you question whether that is their real self. If you look at your content, knowing you the way I do, I could say it's 100% you, even if it's with your arse out on Kilimanjaro or running around, it's always very much you.
Ultimately, most of these guys that we kind of slag off online when we're saying, they're not authentic, they've never done any business, they're just salespeople who are good at making content. But at the end of the day, yeah, they are, and that's their business model, and hats off to them if that's how they want to make their money. I kind of don't want to make my money in that way, nor do I need to, because I've got my own way, and I think therefore it's very important to have the authentic content for me, because people are going to see me in real life. These guys who are making videos, renting a Lamborghini and selling a course for $99 a month, they're probably never ever going to meet in real life anybody that they've sold to. So they're never going to get caught out, and it's probably, for what they need, it probably just doesn't matter. But my entire business model is offline. Whilst I build brand online, everything I do is about transacting with people face to face. People ultimately meet me, and I always say, if you don't like me online, then you won't like me offline. But if you don't like me offline, we're not going to be doing any business together anyway. So what the fuck do I care? And I just think it's a lot easier to be authentic, because you probably don't run out of ideas when you're creating content, because it's just you. But also, you won't run out of steam, or you won't get bored of it either. I think when you've got to do, when you're trying to make things that aren't you, you're not going to do it for long. Okay, you might do it for a week, a month, a year. It's like having a podcast. Ultimately, I forget what the stats are, but there's something crazy like 90% of podcasts don't get past the first 5 episodes, and of the 10% that do get past those first 5 episodes, 95% of them never make it past episode 20. Now, anyone listening to this, I've got these 1 or 2% wrong, fuck off. but the general principle of that is that
it's life in general, isn't it? Consistency, routine, discipline. The authenticity has ever been detrimental to you, because some people would hide certain aspects. At the end of the day, your Instagram does involve the private jets, the luxury yachts, a very high-end lifestyle, which is, at the end of the day, authentic. That's your lifestyle. I can testify for that. I've been a guest on the many a time. But do you think, have you received a lot of hate? How do you deal with that? Is that a problem for you?
Has it been to my detriment? It has at times, but I think ultimately an online personal brand is just really, or in my case with the authenticity, is just an extension of the offline brand. So I don't think it's been any more or less detrimental to me than my day-to-day life is. Some people don't like me. And so then moving that onto online, do I get hate? Very, very minimally. I'm actually disappointed at how little hate I get, because, I always think that the amount of people that say bad things to you is probably minimal compared to the amount of people who are out there actually enjoying what you're doing. So I'm thinking I need more hate because it means not enough people are watching me. But no, I don't really. I think, I wouldn't say my content is wildly polarizing like some other people's is. And you could say it's a good thing or a bad thing, because ultimately, as you always say, if you're trying to please everybody, you end up pleasing nobody. And I'm absolutely not trying to please everybody. I
think one of the great things with your content as well is that no matter what topic you're talking about or what audience you're delivering it to, it's always very concise. It's almost like keep it simple, stupid, isn't it? It's very clear, actionable steps for people to take.
Because I think most things are simple. I've obviously not building a rocket to Mars, but in terms of the principles of business, things are simple. Things are easy to find the answers to out there, and they just don't need overcomplicating.
You started doing the first aspects of personal branding 2016. We're now here 8 years on. The world's changed, the digital age has changed, social media has changed massively since then. So sat here now, and it's something you've conveyed to me in the past as well, but what would you say, why do people need a personal brand now, and what are the main benefits of having it? So
the thing, people who are either not decided if they want a personal brand yet, or if they say they absolutely don't want one, the thing these people are failing to understand is you already have one. Everybody already has a personal brand. It's just a matter of how amplified or not amplified it is, and also whether or not it's a brand that you actually want people to know about. But even if people just think, oh, personal brand, that means influencer, somebody on Instagram with the top off and the pecs out, and you're selling a tooth whitening kit or whatever. If you are the receptionist in the business, if you're the local tennis coach, whatever you are, you've got a personal brand, because that is your characteristics. That's how you represent yourself. It's how people portray you. So first of all, you need to decide if that brand is how you want to be portrayed. So you might need to make some corrections there in your day-to-day life anyway. But secondly, all you're doing online is effectively amplifying and growing or personal branding at scale. So you've already got one. The fact is, you need to control it, and you do need to amplify it, because ultimately, the more people that know about you, the more people that can transact with you, interact with you, whatever that may be. And having the bigger the brand, the bigger the opportunities.
You get kind of old school people that say, "Oh, I don't do social media. I don't want to do the personal brand." But when you think about it, business is people doing business with people.
But it's funny, because they say they don't do it, and maybe they don't do it, but they certainly watch and enjoy the other people that do. And I deal with quite a few old school investors or older school business people who literally in the same breath to me say, that personal branding stuff's ridiculous. I hate this. I hate the other. What you're doing. By the way, I watched that podcast you did with that guy the other week. So people, whether or not people appreciate that what they're looking at is part of branding or not, I don't know, but personal brands have existed from day dot. There's probably no bigger personal brand than Jesus, is there? It just gets talked about more nowadays because it's easier with the internet to do it at scale, and it's been democratized more. In the older days, 5, 6, 10 years ago, to really, I guess, grow and push that personal brand, you needed the backing of mainstream media or of TV channels or whatever it may be to get you across. Now with the internet, with social media, with web pages, with easier ways to reach content on other people's sites, you can really take ownership of that personal brand yourself and really be whoever you want to be.
100%. You look at it now, there's people who are personal brands in their own right. They're then going on to generate fantastic businesses off the back of it. You look at Kim Kardashian and Skims, Rihanna and Fenty. But even looking, like you said, back in history, Richard Branson and Virgin, completely synonymous with each other.
Absolutely.
Like the brand's the logo, Richard Branson's the face. You don't really take one without the other, do you? Yeah. So there's so many opportunities there. So let's take the opportunity to dig into Matt Haycox, the personal brand. Let's start with the brand. And I know this is a question that everyone knowing me and everyone knowing you will want me to ask, which is, where does the pink come from?
Because the pink is going to come.
The pink's what? It's on the yacht, it's in the car, it's on the logos, it's on the t-shirts. Even if you turn up at paddle, it's on the bag. So I mean, first of all, I do genuinely love pink. Why I love pink, I don't know. I always used to have bits of pink things or wear some pink stuff anyway, just because I wanted to. But then when I guess people picked up on it and I noticed it become a talking point, then listen, I'd be lying if I didn't say I went all in on it. I mean, not to the point where I think, oh God, I feel like a total prick today because I'm head to toe pink. But it's that point of difference. It's that memorable thing that works really well with me as part of branding anyway. Because again, if I go to an event and there's 100 people there, I guarantee you, if I'm the one there that's head to toe pink, then I'm going to be remembered more than the other 99 people. Now look, I still have to be able to perform. I still have to know my stuff and everything else. Otherwise, I'm just that pink idiot who came and who came and made a tit of himself at a networking event. I'm not telling everyone to go out there and start dressing in pink, because again, it's back down to what we were talking about with authenticity a minute ago. And you've got to be able to be comfortable in yourself, and you've got to be able to do something at a long enough time scale for it to work for you. But you've got to find these hacks, if you like, that can help add to the brand, that can help make you more memorable and stand out. That's another thing I've observed, which is when people see, you with the pink, or like you say, going and getting the yacht, calling it the sea squirter, people from an external point might just think you're quite an eccentric guy, very out there, very doing it. But I think as someone who's had kind of if we say behind the curtain view of your life over the past few years, there's definitely a strategy to these things, isn't there? It's the idea of put yourself in the shop window, get that exposure and generate attention.
It's like 50-50 for people who can't get their head around the pink, or for people who are too old school to actually get into modern day personal branding. Let's just equate it to that eccentric guy, the guy in the office who wears big spectacles, or that guy who's got that crazy handlebar mustache, or whatever that thing is. You remember them a lot more than you remember everyone else. I can think of a couple of lawyers through my life who I don't use anymore, or haven't used for a long time, but they'll always stand out because they came to work in a bow tie. This old guy who wears like a check shirt and a bow tie every single day. And whether or not he did it on purpose or not, but it became part of their brand and part of what makes them memorable. But then your second point about things being thought out. I mean, yes, whether it's from a branding perspective or whether it's from a networking perspective, pretty much everything I do does have that dual effect. I love my watches, as you do too. And again, look, I would never buy a watch that I don't like, because I've got to enjoy it. But if I buy a Patek, for example, I'm not just buying it because I love it. I'm buying it because I know that will open the door to me, to Patek dinners and lunches or invitation-only events, where I then get to meet the other Patek owners, who invariably will be wealthy people or interesting people, or people that I can network with and interact and transact with. If I buy a Richard Mille, okay, I love it. I absolutely wanted it, but also I'd be lying if I said that doesn't cause a massive conversational piece, when I go somewhere, or if someone saw it on Instagram, etc. And I've been saying for a long time now that a medium-term goal is for me to get a Bugatti. I don't have any fucking interest in cars whatsoever. I've taken Uber 90% of the time, but I know that as expensive as that car may be, the branding opportunities and the business opportunities I can get off the back of it, because immediately I'll be remembered, not just as the idiot with the pink Louis bag, but the idiot with the pink Bugatti. And secondly, again, from a networking perspective, and not directly to do with branding, but I think the networking and branding go hand in hand. That if I can get invited to Bugatti drivers' lunches, Bugatti drivers' excursions and stuff, there is no way that I won't do business, enough business with those other Bugatti drivers to pay for my car 10 times over.
So looking now, we've talked about the Bugatti, we talked about Pink. If I was to say to you, what is the Matt Haycox brand? What would you, in your dream world, if you walked away from a dinner, what would you want people to say about you?
I'm pretty transparent about my life, my failures as much as my successes, I just happy to be known for honest Matt who has fun and makes money at the same time.
There's one of the things you're so good at, and it's a lesson you gave me as well, was the idea, don't be scared to share too much. Because I think so many of us are scared, we're going to give away all our secrets, everyone's going to copy us.
Well, I think ultimately there aren't really many secrets out there. The reason people do business with somebody is either A, they can't be bothered to do it themselves, B, they haven't got the infrastructure to do it themselves, and then when they decide they're not doing it themselves, they want to go and do business with somebody they like. So, I mean, obviously take your business, like SEO, for example. It's not a secret skill that no one else can do. You can quite happily tell somebody, this is the A to Z of the SEO strategy that we are going to carry out on your business. You can go and do that yourself, but you're not going to do it yourself because you haven't got the time, you haven't got the interest, you haven't got the people to do it. So I think sharing the behind the curtain stuff just lets people know that you know what you're talking about. When you talk about myself, I don't know how to raise money. I can tell you the 10 or 15 or 20 things you need to do to package your business up perfectly to be able to then go and find 20 lenders and go and ask them to borrow money. But you either can't be bothered doing it, or you won't do it properly, or you know that if you pay me to do it for you, I will do a better and quicker job. So I think that the more you tell, the more you get people bought into you, because there are no secrets.
So the more you tell them, the more they think there is to do. Less likely they are to do it themselves, just completely run out of steam. Just touch on a final point, brand. In terms of creating a brand identity, which I don't think a lot of people do in the personal brand space. They might create what we call a personal brand for them, but do they actually create a brand? Do they have a logo? Do they have a colour scheme? Do they have something instantly recognisable? What would your advice be to them in terms of actually creating that brand identity?
I think the most important thing to think of is is what exactly do you want to be known for? Well, what do you want to be known for? What do you want to stand for? And what is your end game? From what do you want to achieve from the branding? I think everybody should have a website. Again, it doesn't have to be. Obviously, you've done my website for me, which is pretty in depth. A lot of content on there. We've got big ideas for it, but you don't need just a simple 1 page or 1 or 2 pager will be somewhere to start. You need to have presence on every major social networking platform, because again, what you're trying to achieve from your brand is that when somebody Googles your name, you're popping up on that first page, and the platforms that always pop on the first page are your LinkedIn's, your Twitters, your Instagrams, your Facebooks, etc. So if you've got a website, if you've got 5 or 6 mainstream social media platforms, you've already taken care of 60-70% of that first page of Google, and you can just do that yourself.
The first time we met was at the Dean Street Hotel in London, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I remember, obviously, I think a few weeks in, I think we're going back 2018 then, are we?
Sure, probably right then, yeah.
And you start to mention this website, and I was sat there thinking, what does he mean he's making a website about himself? Because back then, no one had really done that, had they? People weren't making websites about themselves as such, this whole idea. Now you look at a lot of the big people they have, but there's very few people who are in the personal brand space. They've got strong Instagrams, they've got strong podcasts, but a website seems to be a very neglected area.
I think it's probably people's, and whether it's an English thing as well, but people's shyness with thinking, if I make a website, who do I think I am? I'm not Leonardo DiCaprio. What am I making a website for? But if you listen to everything we've talked about, for the last hour or so, it's a fact that you already have a brand. You're already known for something. You just need to tell more people about it.
And it's with your website. We were sat there actually yesterday looking at this, weren't we? And I mean, your website now, the traffic that goes through that, and I feel it gives people a much more in-depth idea of not who you are as a person, but what you actually do business-wise. For those people that want a little bit more, it's a great resource for them, isn't it?
And it was a great resource from my perspective, but also for the people who are, when I say in the early stage of building your brand or haven't even started yet. It's the only place where you're going to get to tell your story, because if you don't tell your story, someone else is going to tell it for you, and it may not be the story that you want everybody to hear. Particularly when it comes to people from a more reputational management perspective, because you can't change the past, but what you can do is start from where you are and script out the future.
Let's jump into the social media then. Look at your Instagram. Obviously, the content on there is so varied, from picture Nelly, your beautiful daughter, to you in business environments, dinners, holidays. It's very varied. Do you set any sort of goals? Is there like a start of the week where you go, I'm going to do this many posts this week, I'm going to do this many stories? Is it really just completely with the flow?
Okay, well, so first of all, it might be varied in terms of the individual activities, but I mean, the overarching strategy of it is it's business posts talking about specific business messages, and then personal posts letting you know who I am behind the scenes. Now, whether that's because it's a picture of Nelly or whether it's me and you playing paddle or whatever, that I guess that's just me, like the real me. So you can either love me or hate me or relate to me or know who I am. And I tend to go main feed posts for the longer form business content, or the businessy messages I want to get out there, and story for telling my personal, I guess my personal behind the scenes type story. And then the second part is, I'm trying to get out, at least one post a day.
So you set yourself that target, 1 post a day?
I mean, listen, I'd be lying if people thought I didn't have a team now who do help, which they do, and that's why we have much more. I mean, I've now got probably 3 other Matt type pages, one for a podcast, one for kind of like daily Matt wisdom and stuff. So all of those pages work together, and all of them have probably at least 2 posts a day. So it's done at scale. But even before I had any of that, I used to do at least 1 post a day on my own page. And again, for anyone who says that they don't have the time to do it, my let's say ingest, but not ingest, is I do most of my social media posting when I'm on the toilet. And if you can't find 5 minutes while you're doing a poo to write a post, or when you sat in the back of an Uber to do it, then you'll never find the time to do anything.
It's life in general, isn't it? Everyone claims they don't have time. Yet I'm sure if we're going to look at most people's Netflix, they've watched 17 series.
But as well, going back to what we talked about earlier about why authenticity is important, because then when it comes to trying to do these things regularly and at scale, it makes it very easy. Everything I tell is my truth. That's why it doesn't take me very long to write a post. I mean, I can smash out 5, 6, 7 paragraphs of a post literally in 5 minutes on the toilet, where other people are going to be looking and saying, "Oh, I've got writer's block." I think you've only got writer's block because you're trying to write about something, something that's not you.
And even though you've now built the team out, like you said, there's a team supporting the social media. Are you still very hands-on with the writing of it?
Absolutely hands-on with the writing of it, or certainly the hands-on with the direction of it. Because again, I've made the mistake before of handing a personal brand over to somebody else, and I think for me the clue of personal brand is in the name. It's a personal brand. When you read these thought leadership pieces that are written for for professionals and stuff, and you think there's no fucking way that guy wrote that. And it depends what you're trying to achieve. If you just want some content out there to put your business in a magazine, or you want to make something that's SEO friendly and is going to get you seen, then fine, you can tick that box and say you've done it. But for me, the personal brand is about the full 360, and that you're then going to use that personal brand to meet people and transact with people. And if people who have got to know you through something that has been written about you, if it's not been written by you, or at least in your tone of voice with your input in, they're going to see through you very quickly.
So with that, you've said, obviously, the one post a day, the stories, how you kind of strategize the idea. What is a good week for Matt Haycox on Instagram? Do you sit there at the end of the week and go, this has been a good week, we've achieved what we want? Or do you sit there sometimes and go, God, they didn't get a lot of engagement?
So look, I think if we talk about engagement in general, I think you're one of the almost lucky, or certainly chosen few, if you get true organic growth and crazy engagement. I'm not saying it can't be done. There's people out there in certain niches that just seem to hit it and everybody loves them and they grow big. But to grow to any kind of scale without putting paid spend behind it is, for me, it's as good as impossible, I think. And I learn, and I'm always learning, this, or not this specifically, but new things every day, every week, every month on the personal branding thing. Podcasting, something massive that I've really learned over the last only 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I've done my podcast for five years now. Got over 300 audio episodes, over 1,000 YouTube videos. And don't get me wrong, the numbers are all right. Or let's say up until a couple of weeks ago, the numbers were all right. But certainly there was no Stephen Bartlett. And then I got introduced to paid ads. Basically a way to pay, just like a Google ad or a Facebook ad or whatever, to put an advert for my podcast in front of the eyes of people who are listeners of podcasts in the podcast market. And in the last 2 weeks, I've had more growth, subscribers and downloads in the last 2 weeks than I've almost had in the last 5 years collectively, by putting a bit of spend behind it. And I now look at that and think, fuck me. If I'd have done, never mind if I'd done it 5 years ago, if I'd have done it 1 month ago, 2 months ago, and I'm looking at it now, like literally addicted to it, thinking, this is the plan that we can have for this for the next, 6, 12 months. And I honestly, I can now almost like see the metrics of getting my podcast to a million downloads a month in not too long for not too crazy amounts of money.
Anyone would think I'd timed this perfectly, wouldn't they? Launching the podcast a week after we find out about the paid advertising on podcasts.
But that's the thing. I mean, how much content is out there that you see, that you come across people and think, oh, that's a really intelligent guy, that's really good content, and you look and it's had 10 views or nobody knows who they are. Having great content and being known at scale are two very different things. And what is the point in doing something good if no one's ever going to find out about it?
You said 5 years is that you've been doing the podcast now?
Yeah, I mean, I started my first episode. I was literally in the same apartment I was living in London when I met you on that Dean Street townhouse.
Yeah. When you first launched, how did that kind of come into your head? Was there as many people doing it, or was it just something you thought of outside the box?
I simply did it because I thought of it as an easier way to create content. I thought, if we need lots of content for these different platforms, if I make a long-form YouTube video, and that as my starting point, I've got a long form YouTube video that I can strip the audio from, and that's an audio podcast that I can chop up into mini clips, and that's my Instagram reels or my my Facebook videos that I can take snaps of pictures from, which is my grid tiles, and take a couple of quotes for Twitter. It was really nothing more than a strategy to repurpose at scale. I never thought I want to have an audio podcast that's got a load of downloads. Yeah.
And now it's obviously growing into, last week, that huge episode with Katie Price, wasn't it?
Well, this week's Katie Price. I think that last week was Keith Duffy from Boyzone. The week before was Lady Victoria Harvey, spilling the beans on Prince Andrew and his misbehaviour. But for me, the podcast is both a chance to be seen myself, and obviously get more people to know me, whether that's to transact with me or to go and find me on some of my other platforms as well. But it's also a great chance for me to get and sit down in front of other people in the framing of an interview that I wouldn't normally get to meet, and and therefore be able to network with and have in my network. And obviously, the bigger that podcast is, the higher caliber people I can sit down with. If I've got 1,000 downloads a month, then it's not very exciting. It's not going to get me a great guest. If I can say I've got 100,000 downloads a month, 1 million downloads a month, all of a sudden, that level of scale. That's bigger than national TV shows. That's bigger than mainstream press. Therefore, why would you not do everything in your power to make yourself get there?
Rolling back a few years, because I think the Matt Haycox show today has been in pretty much every major publication in the UK. So it's getting very big now. One of my favourite stories from you was how I made £1 million off a podcast that no one ever listened to.
Right.
And now it's a completely different story. But going back then, I'd just be interested to dig into that a little bit more.
The two ways it benefits you is, A, if you were to meet me in day-to-day life and we didn't know each other, you'll probably go home and Google me, just like anybody does about anyone. And when you Google me, all of a sudden you see that first page of Google's populated with lots of pictures or lots of videos of me sat down with celebrities, with CEOs, politicians, whatever it may be. All of a sudden, whether or not it's true, you think, oh, Matt must be a bit of a player. How can we sat with all these people? He's obviously a guy of substance, a guy of credibility. The second side of it is, if I want to get down in front of someone to talk to them, and let's say it's a celebrity, the CEO of a business, if I just pick up the phone and go, hey Jamie, it's Matt Haycox here, fancy going for a coffee? Even if I got through to you, you'd be thinking, I need to call the fucking police. Who is this lunatic? Whereas if my office rings to say, hey, Mr. Barr, how would you like to come on the Matt Haycox show with X number of downloads a month, even whether or not that's true, with X number of downloads a month to tell your story to Matt Haycox's audience. By the way, that audience consists of entrepreneurs and self-help followers, and previous guests have been the CEO of Hotel Chocolat and Ant Middleton. All of a sudden you want to come and do it, so you come on the podcast and it gives me a chance to meet you when I wouldn't have got to meet you otherwise. So the reason I say how to make £1 million from a podcast that nobody's ever seen is because I'm just a massive advocate for networking and the opportunity that come from that, and podcasting is a great chance to network. Obviously, the second part of it is you want as many people to see it as possible, because then that gives you more opportunity to do more business. And unfortunately, that's the bit I didn't learn in the earlier years, because for many years, not a fucking dog watched it. Literally, not a soul watched it.
I thought there was some. Even if you look back 3-4 years ago, there was some fantastic podcasts then. Some really, really good content, wasn't there?
I think so. And I've met some great people. I've made some good friendships, and I've learnt a lot as well. Because one of the things we've used as a technique on the podcast as well is to get in front of people that I need to learn something from. Whether it's I launched a newsletter recently, a year or so now, and at the time I did it, we wanted some tips on how to make a great newsletter. So I went and booked on the podcast 2 or 3 owners of online news outlets and very successful newsletters. Was to get them on in the guise of come and tell your story about how you're such a great entrepreneur, but then I get to ask them the questions that I want to know, that my team want to know, and really use it as just a personal mentorship and brain picking session.
Yeah. And with the newsletter, the newsletter's that's something you started doing quite recently, wasn't it?
I think we're probably about 14 months into the newsletter now.
14, yeah.
We've got about 17,000 weekly subscribers. It goes out every Friday with an open rate of about 40%.
Yeah. Do you look at some of the world's biggest brands and they land in your inbox and they land on a weekly basis and it's the same thing week after week, no originality, same messaging, effectively buy from me, buy from me, buy from me. So is there a huge amount of people doing newsletters well? I think it's an area so many big people and so many businesses could improve on.
I mean, I'm a massive newsletter reader, and I've got probably 50 that I'm subscribed to that I would say people doing them well. But when you look at big businesses, corporate businesses, the reason that I don't think they just don't do them well, but it's not just isolated to their newsletter. For me, it's just across all their content in general, is because if you want to do something well, you have to put your reader, you have to put your audience first. What do they want? What are they looking for? What can you give them? How can you serve them? If you can do all that, then it's going to be good content. But what all other people, most other businesses tend to do is say, we're so good because we just closed this deal with, Joe Blogs last week, and by the way, buy from us and you can have a 20% discount today. I mean, who gives a fuck?
Yeah. And when you said earlier, you said obviously the Instagram, one post a day, that can be done sitting on the toilet. When we start talking about things you're committing to on a weekly basis, so obviously you're doing a podcast every week in life, aren't you?
Yeah.
Obviously filming more than that, you're doing a newsletter every week in life, 52 weeks a year. These are quite big commitments, aren't they? How do you find that time commitment? Do you like the discipline of doing it weekly? Do you think for the average person, building a personal brand can deliver that?
So ultimately, it's like anything. If you want the results, you've got to put in the commitment, and the commitment could be time, it could be effort, it could be money. But ultimately, what we're talking about doing here is building a brand because you're going to get something out of it on the other end. I mean, probably we're talking financial. Therefore, to earn that money, you've either got to spend time or spend money in the beginning to do it. And yes, I talk now about things that have been done at scale, and my team are doing it, and people listening to this will be thinking, well, I've not got a team or I can't afford this. But I did it all myself in the beginning. And you've either got time or you've got money, and you decide which one you want to spend.
Yeah. I always say that to people. You get a lot of people going, I've got nothing to do at the minute, I'm not busy. When you're not busy, that's the time you can be doing everything. You've got all the hours in the world to build something, haven't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've touched on a few areas there. One area I'm interested in, because I was always a big fan of A Day in the Life of a Millionaire.
Oh yeah,
it's one of my favorite watches. So let's have a look at YouTube. YouTube, I think, for a lot of people, is a massive, massive platform with huge opportunities. And sometimes you feel like people get transfixed on the Instagrams, the socials. YouTube with some does get a bit lost. If you look at it, the exposure you can get on there, what you can achieve. Look at people like Jake Paul and that. They all came from that YouTube background. How's your experiences with YouTube been?
So I think you've got to look at Instagram and YouTube is obviously two completely different beasts. I think probably the reason people get hung up on or caught up on Instagram is probably because they use it in their personal day to day. Is it because it probably looks sexy, when you think about being an Instagram influencer, but when you put something on Instagram, it lasts for 24 hours at best. Okay, yes, it's on your feed, but no one's looking at your feed. It's only what gets pushed out to you that people see. When you look at Instagram, when you look at YouTube, it's there for life. It's there for absolutely forever. And I think you can't look, whilst it is social media to a degree. For me, you look at Instagram, and that is social media. You look at YouTube, that's not social media. It's the second biggest search engine on the internet. And if you create content on there that answers a message, that has a message that answers the questions that people are asking, then that content will be served up day after day after day after day. I mean, you think yourself how you learn stuff nowadays. Whether that's whatever, how to change a tire on my car, how to fix an SEO problem, whatever it may be. You'll type it into Google. I mean, some people will type it directly into YouTube, but you'll type it into Google, and Google will bring YouTube up for you, and then you'll go and learn by watching a YouTube video. And how many YouTube videos have you watched that are 10 years old, 12 years old, and you don't go, well, that's shit, because that's a 12-year-old video. That video has been the solution to your problem, the answer to your question. And it's just an absolutely phenomenal medium that everybody should be taking advantage of.
It's interesting you mentioned that tyre one, because a few weeks ago in the floods, I was at the side of the road in Dubai changing a tyre, watching it on YouTube. Do you find, obviously with a guy who's got a lot of experience in both YouTube and Instagram, do you adapt your content a lot for the two?
You've got to adapt your content to every platform. Every platform behaves best when the content's native. Because the platform favors you in the algorithm that way, and B, because the viewers of that platform just come to expect it in a certain way. So look, content can be reused across platforms, but it all needs to be repurposed in its own slight different way. And again, I talk all this from experience because of the mistakes I've made, where I'd create a video, for example, for YouTube that we'd then just post it onto Instagram and upload it to Twitter, and that when you look at it, it just doesn't work. I mean, it's the same when you put a picture on Instagram that hasn't been shot properly for Instagram or formatted right, and you look and your head's cut off and your legs are missing and stuff. Even if the algorithms don't mind, the viewing public do, and they get switched off very quickly.
Yeah. So mentioning those different platforms we've looked at, you said going back to 2008, that period to 2016, there was that bad online reputation, you want to call it, or definitely not positive. Looking now, the internet is flooded with great stories about Matt. There's articles everywhere. Do you actively manage your online reputation now, or you just kind of let it be?
No, I mean we don't stop. There'll always be someone trying to pull me down or pull someone else down, and touch wood, there isn't much bad stuff out there. But I'd be lying if I said things don't happen in day-to-day life where it may get a negative comment online, and I can't stop those. All I can do is try and drown them out and make them look less significant. It's just like, I don't know, if you go to your favourite restaurant, there'll always be someone who's had a shit meal in there, and there'll always be a couple of 1-star TripAdvisor type reviews, but as long as most of them are 5, you don't give a shit about them.
Do you engage with the negative comments? Do you go back at them? Do you find yourself in little online wars, or
I'll engage if it's engageable. Yeah. As in, if I can't think of an example, but I mean, if it's impossible to engage, then I won't. I'll just leave it. Again, most things to do with the online brand are just how you would behave with an offline brand. I always say whatever you do online should be the same way that you behave online. And I think if I make a mistake offline, I'll put my hands up and say I've made a mistake, and I just do the same online.
Yeah, we've teed me up quite nicely there. We've covered quite a lot of online stuff there, so let's touch on some offline stuff, because I think as I open the podcast, you are hands down the king of networking. I don't know if I've ever seen anyone network quite as effectively as you, someone that loves it quite as much as you. But I think, a lot of things in life is success. We talked earlier about consistency, and people often say to me, how does Matt do what he does? I say, well, it's quite simple. I'll speak to you some days and you've literally played tennis with someone in the morning, then you've been to the gym with someone else, you've had a breakfast with someone else, you've then done lunch, you've then public spoken event followed by a dinner. You literally can be networking 4, 5, 6 people a day, can't you? And how does that all tie in with the personal brand? Obviously, you get some of those introductions through what you've built online, but how do you extend that into day-to-day life as well?
Well, I guess, as I was saying at the beginning, that you've already got a brand offline anyway. So I guess who I am offline, does help open doors for me, because I'm proactive or helpful or friendly or whatever it may be. I mean, look, I'm always looking to meet new great people. I think the big difference with my networking versus most other people's, which is why they don't like it or they don't get the success I do from it, is because all I'm ever really looking to do at stage one is meet great people and build great relationships. I'm never going out there to try and sell something to somebody. I'm never going out there to try and transact. I just know that if I build a relationship with this person, that worst case scenario from a work perspective is that they're just going to be a fun person I've had in my life. Best case scenario, it might be someone I'm actually going to do some business with, or middle case, they might introduce me to someone else, or whatever it may be. Now that doesn't mean I'm just haphazard running around West Beach, having a drink with anyone who wants to have a drink with me. I am still very targeted in the people that I network with.
So across the socials, the personal everything, the big emphasis is on building the relationship. And that's a great thing that separates you, is like you say, other people are selling products and things which you said in the past, if you had your time again, you might have looked to do. But it's also a great engagement opportunity. People think, why is this guy giving me so much and taking nothing back?
Well, if I could turn around my Matt Haycox branded T-shirt, you'd see it says on the back of it, 80% of what I do for free. The other 20% I get fucking well paid for. And that really, long before the personal brand, that's very much how I've always lived my life, that I'm not trying to get paid on every turn. I'm in there for the big wins, for the big kills, and I'm not going to nick little commissions along the way. I'm not going to, annoy people and be that, be that little sales guy who wants a little tickle here and a little tickle there. I'm going to give. And then one day someone's going to give me a fuck ton back.
It's a big emphasis of life, isn't it? Giver's gain. You got to, if you keep giving without always expecting back, life gives back. You see it so many times with people. They give you a little bit, but they're only really giving until they get their bit back. And, life becomes a transactional. When you meet a genuine person who will give their time, give their energy, give their expertise, without necessarily wanting back straight away, it tends to return tenfold.
But you can't do it disingenuously, because anyone of any caliber can completely see through it. If you're just doing something to get something out of it, even if you try and cover it up, they know.
Yeah. One thing that people tend to be most scared of is public speaking. Something you've been doing a lot of recently. Where does that tie in? How effective is that? What are the main reasons for doing it?
I do it because I like it, for starters. I think, it's, I do like helping people and telling my story. But I think public speaking is very good from a credibility perspective when it comes to personal branding. I think people have a real level of respect for a speaker, and to listen to something face to face as opposed to listening to something on a video. It's two very different things. And then also to take that from being offline to online, when people see that you're a public speaker in the same way that people see that you're a published author, even if only your mom and dad are the only people who've read the book, and even if there was only 5 people watching you speak in that fireside chat, it is just it's a massive status elevator. It's a massive credibility builder.
Yeah. So if we look, listeners coming in today, they're thinking at the show, if he can do it, I can do it. I'm going to get out there, build a personal brand, give them 3 key actionable tips that you would say to them.
First of all, don't worry what other people think, because you most of the people who hate on you are completely irrelevant to you anyway. Like I say, I've always said, if you don't like me online, you won't like me offline. If you don't like me offline, we're never going to do business. So why are you spending time and energy on those people? So I think certainly, don't worry about that. Secondly, whatever you do, be authentic about it. And thirdly, when it comes to picking your platforms, obviously I've talked about all of these platforms that you want to be on, and you want to be on them at scale. But the reality is, if you're just starting, you're going to probably have limited resources. So pick 1 or pick 2, but do 1 or 2 well instead of doing 5 or 6, scattergunned, and pick the ones that suit you better. Be authentic. Don't give a shit what anybody else says, and stick to it for a period of time, and you will absolutely guaranteed have success.
Brilliant. We spent that long telling people about it. We best let them know where they can find you and where to follow you.
well, if I have to tell them, then I've not done a very good job of branding myself. No, you can find me on all things social at the Matt Haycox. That's TheMattHaycox, and you can Google Matt Haycox. I will pop up everywhere. Please, reach out, DM me, ask me any questions. I respond to everything I can.
Perfect. And for those of you that haven't been on before, the Instagram's great. You'll see some amazing content on there. You'll get to see Matt's authentic life. I've always said it, but the Matt you get in real life, the Matt online, there is no difference. It's like an extension. The podcasts are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The guests are huge. Your skills on there as well. It's good having you here today for the help, because you are a fantastic presenter, one of the best storytellers I know. So thank you very much for coming on the first show.
Thanks for making me number 1.
Massively appreciated. We've got some great guests coming up over the next few weeks. We're going to be diving into all things digital marketing. So tune in and see how you can achieve with the help of some wisdom from those that have done it before. Thank you for listening.